Making Spirits Bright is a heartwarming Christmas movie that follows the stories of two families, the Ryans and the Scottos. Grace and Sarah run a home staging company called Upstaged, and they are currently in the middle of staging a house for sale just before the holidays. Grace is busy directing workers and giving instructions on where to place what. Not happy with its current position, Grace sees a piece of furniture and tries to move it. She manages to push the chair to the side when Sarah enters with the client. Sarah introduces the client to Grace as her business partner, and Grace gushes about a piece of furniture found in the client's home which the client had no idea about. Sarah takes Grace aside to tell her that she disagrees with the placement of that piece of furniture, claiming it's too loud for the room. Grace disagrees and feels that it gives the room character. However, she does not stand by her opinions and quietly proceeds to do what Sarah asks. Immediately, we see a disconnect between the two of them. Sarah and Grace are up for a possible reality TV show, and her partner is moving full steam ahead, even though Grace is apprehensive. Sarah asks Grace to head home, knowing her family is expecting her. As she begins to leave, Sarah asks Grace to move the piece of furniture that Grace moved earlier back to its original place. Grace is on her way home when she sees her childhood friend Tony Scotto stuck in his car due to the snow. She helps him by removing the rubber foot mat and placing it at the base of the wheel, which is stuck in the snow puddle. The car moves, and Tony is impressed at Grace's ingenuity. Tony gets out of his car, and the two talk about the past and their family's past. A few minutes later, Sarah calls Grace asking her to return to work, because she is not happy with the look of the living room. Tony is helping his father, Frank Scotto, complete a decoration project for a client's home. His sister asks him about his latest job interview, which went poorly. Tony continues to talk to his sister about the family's failing financial situation. The demand for Frank's decorating services has fallen drastically due to his non-participation in the annual Bright Nights contest. His sister suggests that they broach the subject with their father. Reluctantly, Tony agrees. The family finishes decorating the house and hands it back to the clients amidst rounds of applause. Grace finishes her work with her partner and heads to her father's furniture shop. Her father is busy selling a rocking chair to a customer when Grace overhears the customer asking her father if the store will shut down. This concerns her, but she does not address it immediately with her father. They hug each other, and her father tells her he is participating in the competition. He complains that Grace is not around much and asks about her day. She tells him about the incident with the client earlier in the day, and we see a shared interest in furniture between them. Grace's family is gathered in the dining room, looking over photographs to submit for the competition. Her father asks her to help him design the houses, and Grace is unsure because she feels she is no longer creative or good enough. We see Grace constantly battling self-doubt and insecurities regarding her craft throughout the movie. Meanwhile, Tony and his dad are driving down the road when they pass by a house that used to be a regular client, but has since been decorated by his biggest nemesis, named Glowspace by Wade. The decoration is loud and garish, and does not imbibe the Christmas spirit. Tony carefully suggests that his father should take part in the competition this year, because he was the best, and the town deserves to see his designs. Frank's company handles many construction projects and takes up very few decoration projects, even though decoration is what Frank loves to do most. Frank complains about all the new companies in town who have robbed him of his customers. Tony urges his father once again to participate. Frank, however, is apprehensive because the last time he took part, he couldn't complete his designs and was therefore disqualified, embarrassing him profoundly, serving to explain his reluctance to participate. Tony convinces his father, assuring him that he will ensure Frank finishes his design this time. The next evening, Grace is strolling around town with her mother. She goes on to express her discomfort with her business partner to her mother. She tells her mother about the TV show deal in the making, and expresses her doubts about continuing their business partnership. Her mother reminds her that Sarah is not only her business partner, but also her friend. Being friends and business partners is challenging and a delicate balance. We now understand that Grace's family and Tony's family have been at odds for years. They used to be business partners, and one incident split the two families apart, so much so that Grace's father Bill still refuses to drive down any road with a house decorated by Frank's company. Tony and his family are also taking a stroll around town, and Tony tells his sister that he managed to convince their father to participate in the competition. His sister is confident that they will win. Tony notices Grace and buys her a dozen cookies to thank her for helping him out with his stuck car. He comments that if it were their fathers in the same situation, they would have driven away without helping each other. Grace makes it a point to mention that they are not their fathers. They laugh at that and continue making small talk for a few minutes. We see Wade handing in his submission to the event organizers. The organizer gushes about her fondness for Wade's designs and is sure he will be one of the 4 designers who will qualify to move to the next round. Grace's father and mother are standing in line behind Wade to submit their photographs for the competition. The organizer is excited to accept Bill's proposal and informs Bill that the prize for this year is more significant than any of the previous years. The winner will gain the contracts for all the municipal buildings in the town, as well as a cash prize of $50,000. The Ryans are super excited about this deal, but their excitement is dampened by meeting Tony's family, the Scottos, who are standing right behind them. The two men begin their trash talk, bringing up flaws from years ago. Bill taunts Frank by reminding him that he probably won't finish, just like the last time. The comment hits home, and Bill is visibly upset. Grace and Tony notice the argument between the two families and step in to try and neutralize the conversation. The organizer also witnesses this scuffle between the two men and warns them to sort out their issues before the competition, or she will be forced to disqualify them. The two men reluctantly give in and walk away in different directions, leaving Tony and Grace standing awkwardly with each other. The next day, Tony's nephew asks Frank what the fight was about, and we get a little more information regarding the prior relationship between the two men. Bill and Frank used to be best friends, and in college, they began a decorating company named Making Spirits Bright. The two families were so close that they would spend Christmas together. We learn that Bill blames Frank for the dissolution of their friendship, due to his constant need to take on more projects for more money. Frank always put money in front of quality, which drove a wedge between them, leading to Frank kicking Bill out of their business. A similar conversation is played out at the Ryans, where we see Bill blames Frank. Bill believes that Frank's obsession with perfection and constant need to change and modify plans as the project progressed became too much, so he had to end his partnership with Bill. Frank justifies his situation by saying that if Tony's dad had worked a little faster, they would have gotten a lot more jobs and money. Frank tells us that the partnership was good until Bill insulted Frank, which is when Frank opened his own furniture store and named it Deck the Halls. The following day, Frank is sitting at the dining table in the kitchen. Tony walks in, and Tony tells him he will pick up a shift at the bar. Tony's father offers him a part of his contract business, even though he knows Tony may not be interested in that job. Tony appreciates this, but politely declines. He passes by his mother, who is sitting in the living room, reminiscing about the time when the Ryans would come over and make ornaments for the tree together. His mother shows him a small ornament shaped like a house, which was made by Grace. She also hints towards a possible relationship between Grace and Tony. Later that evening, Tony is at his job as a bartender, fixing cocktails as he makes small talk with his colleague, when Grace walks into the bar. She sits at the bar before him and starts a conversation. She tells him that her father was driving her crazy by constantly pacing back and forth, waiting for the announcement of the finalists. Tony laughs and comments that his father is likely doing the same thing. She asks him about his bartending gig, and he tells her it is temporary, just helping a friend out. She remembers that he used to play hockey and that he received a scholarship to a college. He teases her, asking if she is keeping tabs on him, and both laugh about it. Tony confirms that the information she heard was correct. After his stint at Arlington, he played hockey for Boston University, but a knee injury forced him to quit. She feels sad for him, but he assures her that he is happy with how things are, and he went on to get an MBA. He also reveals that he used to work at a marketing company, but when one of his risks went bust, he was fired, forcing him to return home. She empathizes with him, but he simply asks her what she's been up to. She tells him about the struggles she's been facing with her business partner recently, and about her business in general. They continue talking to each other, with mild banter and flirting between them for the rest of the evening. Grace gets a text from her mother telling her they got into the competition. A few seconds later, Tony gets the same news, that his father is also one of the participants. The next day, the four teams stand before a group of houses, and the organizer explains the competition's rules. Each of the four designers will be allocated a random home to decorate. They will have 3 days to transform the house. Any house not completed by 6 p.m. on December 21st will be disqualified immediately. She makes fun of Frank, who famously did not complete his house the last time he participated, making Tony's father feel slightly embarrassed. The competition will take place over 2 rounds. The 2 best designers from round 1 will go head-to-head in the finals to win the contract for the town of Ashland Falls, which is worth $25,000 and a cash prize of $50,000. Wade introduces himself to Frank. Frank does not like Wade, because he considers Wade's designs to be flashy and gaudy, and a bit of conflict ensues between them. The competition is now officially underway. Tony and his father sit at a cafe while his father begins planning. Tony gets up to get hot chocolate and meets Grace at the counter. She buys him his hot chocolate, and he tells her he had a lovely time last night, striking up a flirtatious conversation. The two begin making fun of each other lightheartedly, but the exchange soon turns sour as they both support their fathers. What started as a fun conversation slowly turns into anger and awkwardness, making them go their own way. Tony tries to convince his father not to make his designs too complicated, but Frank cannot understand that less is more. On the same line, Grace asks her father to edit his plan. because it feels like Bill threw everything he had at the design. She thinks he's overstuffing, and that bigger doesn't necessarily mean better. Her father leaves the room to answer a phone call, and in the meantime, Grace gets a call from her business partner, informing her that the producer wants to meet the two of them on December 21st. Bill walks back into the room looking agitated. The four teams begin decorating, and the host reiterates the rules again for no particular reason, then officially kicks off the contest. Wade immediately begins instructing his crew about the light, sound, and other flashy decorations he will be using. Grace asks her mother who Alonso is, since she noticed Bill was very agitated after the call. Grace also tells her mother about the conversation she overheard regarding the shop closure. Her mother reveals that Alonso is the manager of one of Bill's stores. She reluctantly admits that the store and the business are not doing well. Her dad's planned expansion did not go well, and they are in debt. We find out that Bill has a habit of thinking bigger is better and quantity over quality, and we see this is reflected in his store's affairs. Grace is annoyed that she wasn't informed about this, and is now conflicted about what to do next. A peppy upbeat vibe is all around as each decorator fights to finish their designs, and the organizer announces a wrap for the day. That evening, Frank is sitting in the living room, looking at a box of handmade ornaments made by the Ryan family. Tony sees his father's nostalgia, and tells him it is okay to miss the Ryans. Frank adamantly refutes Tony, and claims that he does not miss them. Tony smiles at his father and heads to meet his friend Pat at the pub. He sees Grace, and they exchange pleasantries. The situation is awkward after their last meeting, and they apologize to each other. A snowball is flung at them, instigating a snow fight. She brushes some snow out of his hair, and they look at each other momentarily. As they turn to look away, they see both their mothers sitting in a cafe together. They are shocked, because they never knew the two women had kept in touch. The two women tell Grace and Tony that just because their fathers had a falling out, they shouldn't be punished too. They even take a trip to Virginia Beach every summer without their husbands ever knowing. The two women then turn the tables on them, and ask what they are doing together. There is an awkward moment, and they explain that they just bumped into each other in the middle of town. Grace is visibly worried about her father's business situation, and explains it to Tony. He offers to look at the books to see if he can help. Grace does not accept his offer because she knows her father is stubborn and will never accept help from anyone in the Scotto family. He points out that if their mothers can meet up without their father's knowledge, he could also check the company books. Swayed by his logic, she agrees, and they plan to meet the next morning to review the books. The following day, Tony is sitting at her father's shop and looking through the books. She sits beside him, and they begin looking at spreadsheets together. Later that day, Tony is busy completing his father's design. Frank, however, changes his idea midway and creates an entirely new design. Frank's flaws are clearly showcased, as we see the inability to stick to one particular plan, and the constant shift between different designs while wasting valuable time. Tony tries to reason with his father, but he refuses to listen and moves full steam ahead with the change of plans. On the other hand, Bill is not happy with his design either. He cannot seem to put together a cohesive design. Grace reassures him he still has a day to make his designs pop. The second day is about to end, and neither of the families is happy with their decisions or decorations. The next morning, we see Tony going over the books to Bill's store. His father walks in with a concerned expression, and fears that Tony might be turning into him. Frank explains how he is constantly plagued with doubts about his ability, and whether he can surpass his creations year after year. He describes how the anxiety is too much to bear, which was why he couldn't finish his previous design. Frank is worried that he might not complete it again. Tony convinces him that they will finish this year. At the Ryans, too, things are not going smoothly. Grace's dad is working on his design at the dining table. Grace receives a text from Sarah reminding her of tonight's party. She tells her dad about her doubts about the TV show and the strained relationship between them. "Yeah, we get it." And her father tells her that he understands, and suggests talking to Sarah about this. Grace, taking his advice, begins drawing a plan for a new design. It is the final day of the competition, and the other contestants are placing the final touches, while the Scottos and the Ryans are far from complete. Tony and Grace spot each other from across the yard and discuss their respective families' progress. Tony suggests that since neither of their houses seems to be in good shape, both families need to join forces to have any hope of making it to the final. Grace likes the idea and shows him the new design she created that morning. Tony is impressed by her drawings, but doesn't think the two families can keep their egos in check long enough to make it through this round. Grace convinces him that it is possible, and hopes that they can bring out the best in each other, while Tony is still not sure, but both agree to have this conversation with their fathers. At this suggestion, Bill says he would rather hang up his lights permanently than collaborate with Frank. Tony manages to convince his father, but Frank does not want to decide before he knows what Bill says about the idea. On the other side, a similar conversation occurs between Grace and her father, who asks the same question Tony's father asked him. Grace and Tony lie to their fathers, convincing them that the other one is in on the plan. The two men finally concede that neither can finish their individual projects. They discuss terms and shake hands. Grace and Tony bring this proposition to the event organizers and get approval to proceed with their merge design. The organizer reminds them that they have less than half a day to complete their houses, and they will get disqualified if they are not finished by 6 p.m. The day is complete, and the two families manage to pull off decorating the entire house. There is a small gathering of people while all the contestants wait for the results. The organizer announces that the two teams to make it to the finals are Glowscape by Wade and the merged team of the Ryans and Scottos. Both families are ecstatic about it, and Grace's dad is excited about how much money will come in. This is a sore spot for Tony's father. Bad blood rises again, and the two families are at odds. They discuss what happened 15 years ago, and they air out all the issues they faced with each other. Frank feels that Bill only wants money and does not care about the quality of work. Bill thinks that Frank is so obsessed with perfection that it is no longer about the design, but his own ego. Frank is upset and walks away from Bill. Tony walks Grace to her car, lightly discussing their family's stubbornness. He asks her if she has any plans, and she tells him of the business meeting she has to attend with her partner regarding making a reality TV show based on staging houses for sale. Tony is impressed and wishes her good luck. As she reaches her car, she remembers that she gave her car keys to her mother and needs to go back to her place to change. He empathizes with her, wishes her all the best, and begins to walk away. She is confused by his behavior, at which point he turns around and laughs. He offers her a ride home, where she keeps a spare set of keys. She gets ready for her party while he waits in the living room. She walks into the room, dressed to the nines, and Tony is unable to take his eyes off of her. The two of them leave her house and go to the party. She tells him that the bar where the meeting is scheduled is not far away, and that they can walk. They enter the bar, and he waits by the counter while she meets the producer. Her partner is already there. The producer asks them what they have planned for the show. Grace has not yet had this discussion with Sarah. However, Sarah moves full steam ahead without discussing things with Grace, while offering her own idea of what the show should be. Sarah proposes a show where the two set up houses for people who want to sell. They would talk about the designs and the layout, and she laughingly points the finger at Grace for her obsession with fancy furniture. Grace is uncomfortable with the conversation. The producer loves her idea and compliments them for having worked on this together, calling them the dynamic duo. When he leaves their table for a couple of minutes, Grace uses this opportunity to express her feelings and what she has been going through over the past few months. She confesses that she hasn't been feeling like a partner lately, more like an employee. Sarah is appalled by this and asks Grace to explain further. Grace explains that Sarah has been entirely dismissive of her actions and ideas. Sarah tries to convince Grace that her opinions matter and that it is Grace's fault because she does not speak up. Sarah still can't believe it, even as Grace points out that she was dismissive of her discomfort just a few minutes ago. Sarah suggests continuing this conversation at a later time, dismissing Grace once again. Grace realizes she does not want to be part of this partnership and leaves the meeting. She makes her way across the bar to Tony, who is at the counter buying his drink, and requests that they leave immediately before Tony has had a chance to even have a sip. Grace tells Tony about what happened in the meeting, and Tony is happy that she stood up for herself. They pass by a group of carolers, and Tony regales her with funny caroling stories. He recalls one time when he met his cousins in Tuscany, and they went caroling in Italian to every house in the area. This gives her an idea. Tony's dad is in his house, putting the final touches on his Christmas tree, when he notices the little ornament hung on the tree that was made by Grace. He is reminiscing about all the old times, and taking a tough look at the situation and what has happened. Grace and Tony stand outside his house and begin singing Christmas carols horribly in Italian. His parents are happy and invite the two of them to dinner, but Grace and Tony convince them to join their carol group so they can sing to one more family. A few minutes later, the four of them are standing in front of Grace's house, singing carols in Italian. Everyone is excited to meet each other except the two men, who hang back on the porch, not sure what to say to each other. Bill finally acknowledges his part in the falling out of the relationship and apologizes for putting money in front of everything else. Frank also admits that his stubbornness and his ego always got in the way and kept him from seeing that Bill only wanted the best for their business. Bill reminds Frank of their conversations regarding their children and how they imagined them together one day. In a heartwarming moment, they put their differences aside and move forward. The day of the finals has arrived, and they each have 2 days to complete decorating their houses. The rules remain the same as in round 1. The four of them get together and begin their planning. They are still determining whether they can finish the design within the 2-day deadline. Still, they all concur that by working collaboratively, adhering strictly to the designs, and avoiding any unnecessary modifications, they should be able to complete it in time. With everyone satisfied, they set out to begin their work. Day 1 is almost over, and they only have a few extra hours the next day to put the final touches on the decorations of their house. In the meantime, Wade is almost done with his designs, and shows off the light and sound system he installed. They look on, half in astonishment and half in disgust. They are also slightly intimidated by Wade's design, and wonder if theirs is good enough. Grace and Tony have a moment where Tony asks Grace to set up a meeting with her father to discuss the current situation of Bill's business. Bill is furious and cannot believe Grace shared the family business books with Tony. Initially, he wants to avoid listening to Tony, but after a while, Bill realizes that Tony has a good plan and agrees to look at the numbers to plan his investment. It is the final few hours of the competition, and everybody is busy putting the final touches on the house, making it look as beautiful as possible. Frank is up on a ladder fixing bulbs. Sarah visits Grace and apologizes. She reminds Grace of their friendship and admits that her want for the TV show led her astray, and that she would never want to end their friendship. Frank falls off the ladder a few minutes later and is taken to the hospital. The rest of the family sits in the waiting room, worried, waiting for news. In the end, Frank has a fractured clavicle, but is going to be okay. Everyone breathes a sigh of relief and tries to get an extension due to the accident. The committee tells them that no extension can be given, so they scramble to finish the decoration. It's 2 minutes to go, and they have finally finished their house, and now only need to test out the lighting. Grace tries to light up the house, but it is not working. With 30 seconds to go, Tony is frantically looking for the problem, and finds one of the cords unplugged. He plugs the cord in when the time is finally over. They do not get a chance to test their lights, and are worried whether the lights will work. In typical reality TV style, the host introduces the first participant to show his house. Wade goes first, and the crowd immediately cheers him on. Once his show is over, the host walks over to introduce the second team, when she realizes that they don't even have a team name yet. From the crowd, Frank walks towards Bill and gives the host their original business name, Making Spirits Bright. The two of them turn on the lights together, while an invested audience watches in amazement at the subtle and intricate decoration of their house. The winner is announced, Making Spirits Bright is crowned the champion, and everybody is happy. 1 year later, Bill and Frank continue to argue about decorations and designs. Tony has a new job working for a restaurant. Grace and Tony are presumably married, and everyone is gathered in the living room in front of the TV to watch the pilot episode of Grace and Sarah's reality TV show, called Upstaged. The movie ends happily, where all is well in their little bubble.